over to you.
Thank you so much, Simon. Yeah, so I'm Adam, CEO of VundaHaus, and I'm joined by Alex, the CPO, Chief Product Officer. So VundaHaus is a startup, early stage startup. We're a couple of years old, and we are working in the retrofit space to develop an off-site solution that's rapidly able to retrofit a residential house. So I'm sure everyone here knows about how difficult retrofit is, and it's very labor intensive, and it's also has a shrinking labor force. So one of the things we're looking to do is increase the productivity by making this an offsite solution. And that means that we've been doing some R&D over the last couple of years on a particular approach, which Alex will describe in the next couple of slides. Just to introduce, so myself, I've got a background also in property as a landlord, but also in technology and software. And we're also joined by Alex, who's the Chief Product Officer, who has a background in retrofit and architecture, as well as a deep expertise in off-siting as well. We're also joined by Max, who's got a materials science PhD from and research background, and also Chris Brown, who has also got over 15 years in architectural experience in retrofit as well. So I'll hand over to Alex, and you can take us through what we're up to.
Before I show you what we're up to, it'd be great to hear in the chat what you do in retrofit. So your role, the kind of projects you're working on, just to give us a sense of who's in the room. I'll just give you a minute or two to do that. I can't actually see the chat, so Adam, if you can kind of pick up anything that's interesting in there.
I can make you co-host actually.
Have we got any people who have done any retrofit work or projects? I'm guessing yes, right?
Yeah, there are on the call. I do know that that's people's experience just from being familiar with some of the names. Yeah, there's some retrofit coordinators and designers and architects there.
Any installers? No, probably not. We've got some shy people. Do you want to move on to the
Yeah.
I'll move on. I was going to ask you another question, which is currently don't list all of them, please. We'll be here all day. But are there any key pain points that you're currently experiencing in your retrofit projects? Whether that's about, what do I do as a landlord, or dealing with design, or tenant engagement, or all the way through to construction, post occupancy. It's interesting to see whether yours are the same as ours.
Alex, would it be okay for you to come off mic? Because I think you probably could answer on behalf of a lot of people there with your experience and just give a quick overview in terms of some challenges you're facing.
Best attempts at participation foiled. So, we see there's challenges the whole way through the process, which is what brought us to looking at this as a kind of tech startup solution. And that's all the way through from it's complex and long-winded, has a lot of uncertainty in deciding what measures you need, predicting performance. It's then quite a laborious process about engagement, speccing stuff, bringing stuff together as a solution. The design process for retrofit can never be quite off the shelf like new build can. So you've got this pilot after pilot rather than big pipelines and scale and repeatability often. We end up with a lot of surveys, a lot of coming and going to properties, disrupting the tenants. Stuff on site then takes a while. Virtually everything ends up being an abnormal, it sometimes feels. And even then, the outcomes aren't often as good as we would like them to be. Either it's taken a long time, tenants aren't particularly happy, aesthetics aren't very good, or sometimes real botch jobs because it's so down to skilled labour, weather conditions, etc. And then we leave tenants with homes that might even be worse than they were started with. So what we've been up to is creating, as we said, an off-site approach to external wall insulation. The the project on the screen at the moment is our first pilot some while ago in South Wales. And what we're going to focus on here is it is offsite, but it's not offsite in the way that new build tackles offsite. That stuff just doesn't translate to retrofit. Big panels, we've seen some traction in the European market, but we just don't have the stock or kind of land or pipelines set up in the UK for that to work. There's been a few companies that have tried and failed. So this is around, setting up just the right size components, streamlining the processes that need streamlining, and not making things that already kind of work any more complicated than they need to be. So we've had that very pragmatic, like if it doesn't need to be there, design it out approach the whole way through. So this one, you might not be a fan of Pebble Dash, but it was to match the existing context. And we also developed eaves details, window reveal details, party wall details, all dry fit for this project. The windows were all replaced, brought out in line with the EWI system. And broadly, went very well. People were very happy about it. But we did realize that although we kind of like the sort of modern, sleek appearance of panels, it's not for everyone, especially when people are expecting a continuous finish. And there's still a huge market of brick in the UK, brick facades, where people are kind of reticent to put retrofit external measures on them. The more recent pilot we've done is in Sheffield with local council. This we were using an off-site panelized brick effect finish. Again, for more dry fit details for, in this instance, verge and plinth panels. It's worth noting this was part of a whole house retrofit. So the front facade you can see isn't our system, that was repointed in lime plaster. There was an MEV installed. You can see the solar panels that have been added to the roof. Lots of things about this went really well, and the landlord was really happy with it, but there were some limitations from the kind of small scale production we were using and where we're at with the product, including needing to point up the joints between panels on site. And the time it took us in the factory was nowhere near as fast as we would have liked it to be.
I think it might be worth just outlining, Alex, why we transitioned to brick. So there's 80% of the housing in stock in the UK is brick facade, roughly. I mean, it's quite hard to get the exact stats, but that's roughly the amount. And there is the options on the market are quite limited to treat these properties in a sympathetic way. So there is obviously render available, and that's the default option for almost all external wall solutions. But there is, and there are some brick effect, or either that's brick effect render or brick slips on the market, but they are very, very labor intensive to apply, and that means that they come out very, very highly priced. So usually the cost is something around £300 to £350 per square meter on the install cost. And that means that they basically don't get on any of the projects unless they are, high profile demonstrators or very limited runs. So typically what happens is you've got an offering which is plain render or plain render. And in many cases that is either, not allowed by planning or very difficult to get through planning, or it does go through, but people are actually not very happy with it in some sense. There's a feeling of that is losing something. And we definitely see that there is a niche and a need for allowing a more sympathetic retrofit in a very more cost-effective and scalable way. And that does mean that there is the need to be able to fit in with the local architecture and the local the brick, matching the brick effectively. So I think that's just kind of a segue into what you're going to go on to next, Alex.
But then on that then, Adam, so going back to the South Wales project, have you dismissed the panels now then, or not?
I think the feedback was that although, and actually people in locally did really like it. We got a lot of feedback saying it looked really good. And I think when you're in actually standing next to it, the joints are not very visible. On photos they are quite visible, but in real life they're not. But I think thinking about, does this have widespread use into the sort of very large scale, which is what we're trying to solve, we think that that is limiting things somehow. And so what we're looking for is something that's much more widely applicable. And visible joints are something which generally on the residential market, what we found from feedback is it is accepted in some places, but generally not, less acceptable. And I think that's a learning that we had along the way. And that also applies to like panels of bricks where you can see the half cuts and the joints effectively. And that's one of the key learnings that we had, is that, you know, there is one of the reasons why render does have some appeal is that you know, there's a history of rendered houses and things like that, so it has some history there. But I think what we're trying to do then is find a way that can work with what people like and not push against that to try and get adoption where people are not really ready to accept it.
And Alex also mentioned on the previous project that the windows were replaced. Is that because that's required in order to fit the panels, or is it just just because they were retrofitting, therefore they were looking to improve everything?
So yeah, on that one, that was choice to do that. They were sort of rather sad state at the start, so they were sort of needing an upgrade. But no, we designed the window termination assembly in order that we don't need to change windows. You can do that at the same time, you can do it later, you can keep the windows where they are, or you can push them out into the facade with sort of just a kind of suite of options basically on that.
Okay.
Again, it's a kind of pain for wet applied systems where if you don't change the windows, often it's difficult not to change the windows. If you don't change the windows, then you change them later, you make an absolute mess of your reveals because it's all retro.
Yeah. Cool.
So leading on from what Adam just said, what we're now working on, and hopefully we ought to show you this slightly less censored soon, we have coming up a customizable panel. So the aim is to be able to do a full brick match to local brick sizes, bonds, colors, etc. We've developed a fully dry fit jointing system that deals with weatherproofing, including on the castellated joints of panels, which is pretty unique in our understanding. It's called concealed fixings. So on the Sheffield pilot, we needed to sort of touch up and repoint over some fixings. This is all concealed. And the install speed is super fast. It's about, well, what's the best way to explain it? It's about 15 minutes per panel area, and a panel is about a square meter. So you can do a house in about a day in theory if you've got nothing else to tackle. Yeah, we're awaiting some sort of larger scale trialing on this for confirming all that, but it's looking very good at the moment. And I'll just hand over to Adam now to talk through the sort of system and process side of it.
Yeah, so I guess what Alex was talking about was our R&D into, you know, the system that we're developing, but around that, in order to make off-siting work, it needs to come with a service as well. You can't sort of just deliver the parts. So what we're looking at is to come up with a simple sort of, you know, holistic process that covers all of that. So alongside that, we are starting with taking on commercial jobs at the minute. We offer a 30-minute free retrofit consultation with the team. We can also do home visits, which we started doing recently, and we're also delivering a home energy plan, which is really like the pathways to retrofit for a house. And then we're also working through then implementation, not just of EWI, but all the things that come with it, so that we can make it a more holistic service. Do you want to go to the next slide? So we're also, as part of this, we've been developing a piece of software in-house, and this is really to make it much quicker to optioneer and to discover what the different options and how they work together to retrofit a house. So effectively, light modeling of what the cumulative payback and carbon savings are as you apply different measures together. So if you apply insulation, if you apply heat pumps, apply batteries, solar, what's the diminishing returns as a package as a whole? And you can sort of understand that, and that makes it very quickly for us to understand what the right options are and whether additional options make sense, and give that back to our customers. A little bit around the process. So as we said, this offsite process is something which it requires a service around it. So we've been developing how you can remote estimate and to capture the dimensions of the property from a site visit. So in the Tinsley one, we use LiDAR scanning, and you can see the scan there that we transform into a CAD model. Effectively, we're also looking at ways to make that easier and cheaper, and potentially to engineer out the need for a really accurate LiDAR scan model, which we do at the need at the minute. But that's on the roadmap, is basically to remove the need to have the highest accuracy and potentially be able to move to photogrammetry, which obviously has lower costs associated. With the tolerance and the accuracy, it's something that maybe Alex, you want to talk a little bit about. So part of the design of the system is how we make sure that the tolerances are something which we can cope with to a certain level, and that you can also adjust on site, so that there isn't this kind of idea that if the panel was wrong or not quite as accurate as it needed to be, that means it gets sent back to the factory. That has been something which has hindered other types of retrofit offsite solutions, especially large SIP panels where they come and they're fitted by crane. One of the things that has hindered the adoption of those is often if there is a mistake, that causes a lot of rework, and that eats up your productivity gains effectively.
And then how does it work from when you've got ventilation, bricks, etc.? I mean, I'm presuming when you're scanning it or you're taking a photo right at the start, you can see where they are.
Yeah, so you can see a couple of ones on Tinsley, which in fact on Tinsley we're sealed up as part of the retrofit process because an MEV was being included. But yes, features that we need to work around, we can know where they are on the facade, we can plan panels around them, and you can still, as Adam was saying, modify panels on site. We've been careful not to kind of assemble things in a way that means that you have to disassemble them. We want you to just be able to chop the end off or drill a hole in it wherever you need to, if you need to, in order that stuff is super easy, and you can say, okay, I don't have to worry about it on the survey. I'll just drill a hole 73 mil in from the left, and it's quick.
Yeah, and I think that is something which when we talking to installers, it's something that we need to work around the way that retrofit is done today, and the necessities of being flexible, because what we've seen with the scanning is it's never 100% accurate, and you never get, there's always something that you've missed on the scan. I mean, in that photo, you see that there's quite a lot of debris at the bottom. Mm-hmm. There's all like that, right, which is blocking like 100% accuracy of a scan, and also things like bows in walls or things that come up unexpectedly. So there needs to be some way to adapt on site, even if it's a small, rare occurrence. You need some way to cope with it.
And I think it's also worth mentioning here that like offsite isn't kind of a silver bullet or kind of black magic, right? It works for some things, it doesn't work for others. If we can bring stuff into a factory, you can do it you're either going to do that and get a benefit because you're working in controlled conditions, and so you can do it year round, it's easier, it's more ergonomic, but it only really generally makes a difference in terms of like cost and productivity if you can automate it in some way. If you just bring a fully manual process into the factory and with no saving on that automation and speed, you've probably introduced coordination time and risk in, did you get that vent in exactly the right position? Was that 6 by 3 meter large format craneable panel exactly the right size? So you have to claw back that additional overhead and coordination through automation, either in design and parametrics, and automating production information, which is some of the stuff we're working around LiDAR and photogrammetry, or because you can take what would have to be a manual process on site and labor intensive and automate it because you can put it on a line.
And then moving on to the manufacturing, that's something that we are working at the moment. Is what we realize is, to make this work, we do need to have fairly low lead times and the ability to make small batches. As Alex alluded to earlier, right, there isn't the pipeline from large landlords that could do continual factory type that you might have seen tried in new build, and I think even there that struggle to gain traction. With many of the new build offsite manufacturers going bust. So we need something which is able to stop, start, have small batches, be very customizable. And that's something that we are working on. We've got basically we're looking at the next way to be able to scale that up. We've got some really promising avenues. I won't go into the details of it, but basically it's where we've manufactured so far, it's been small batches and relatively manual, if we're honest, like quite manual processes. So what we're doing is just, in the system that Alex has just sort of described earlier with the panels that we've developed recently, is how that can be something that can be automatable, streamlined, and much less labor intensive, while still being kind of mass customization as we need it. And that will be fabricated in the UK, although we will buy many of the components potentially from abroad or different places. So we're not,
Oh, Adam, your mic's gone.
I think I might have.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Did my speakers pick up the on a different?
We just lost you for a moment, but we can hear you now.
Okay, apologies. I think my Bluetooth speakers picked up on and switched me to those. Apologies. Yeah, so I don't know where you lost me, but I was just saying we are developing the manufacturing to be able to basically have small batches, mass customization. And that's something we realize we need. The existing manufacturing process has been a little bit manual as we've learned how to do this. But the next step with the system that we're developing now, we're moving to something that is, potentially very highly automatable.
And then do you foresee that the installers will be employed by you, or do people have to source their installers?
Really good question. So we will be looking to have a B2B model. So we're moving towards that. And that is something where we will not be the installers. In fact, the installers will be approved installers that we will train and onboard to our system. And they will also be our sales channels in many cases. So it won't be something that we will install. Currently, right now, we do have our own sort of installation team. We do that ourselves. But that's while we're in the early days. So we're sort of transitioning to the model where in the future, it'll be a much more scalable approach. Because I think building up a huge installer base is probably not likely, and that in fact that already exists in the market. There are installers who are perfectly capable of installing this, and in fact what we're doing is making this actually easier to install and quicker. And because it can be installed in any weather, they get the ability to work also in times where right now they're turning jobs away. So it's an added productivity as well as the speed of installing it is dramatically improved. And what we will intend to do is to create a logistics process which delivers that as a kit of parts, all sort of like with labels, instructions of the house, and then they can install it on site. Mm-hmm. And it will be available as a kind of a technical support as they go through that.
And then what you mentioned about standard EWI is around about £350 a square metre.
That's for brick effect. So render is usually coming out for the SHDF is normally around about 250 to 280. So for brick effect, where people want to apply brick effect, that puts it into the bracket where often that doesn't get treated.
And is planning required then if you were to put in EWI or not?
But in this case, this particular project, the planning department in Sheffield did definitely say it has to be matched like for like, and that was quite a strong requirement. So yeah, in most cases, in many cases it is. In some areas it is allowed, But then you've also got, the asset owners are sometimes not wanting to do that because the character of the area is such that they don't want to, make a perceived degradation to it. So it depends. Sometimes it's customer preference. Sometimes it is planning. But we definitely see that in many areas, that is a problematic thing.
In many areas, there's the option of doing this on the permitted development, so not full planning, if you can reasonably match the thing. So that becomes a tipping point whether you end up needing full planning or not sometimes.
So the whole process from a customer perspective, well, I suppose, I mean, I know at scale you're going after social landlords, presumably you're not looking necessarily for individual landlords, or so it is large social landlords where you're looking to solve this issue. That's already part of their
Well,
need to make these improvements, but it's going to take a while, isn't it, from their inquiry through to implementation.
Yes, yeah, no, really good point. So we are actually, with the B2B model that we are working on, it will be possible to go to talk to a private able to pay installer, and they will be able to install our system. So although we will not deal sort of like with each individual person, we hope to get our system to be able to be bought by private residents as well. And that is one thing that we're trying to design in, so that the aesthetics are something that is actually appealing, that somebody would want to have that rather than something that they would not. And I think, so our goal is really the entire retrofit market, not just the social landlords. Obviously, you get the scale with the social landlords, but we want to make something that feels quite premium, right? That has a well matched and sympathetic approach, and something that is also, as we said, like widely customizable, so that if you want, you want it to match very well to your house, and you want a premium set of finishes and features, that's something that we can offer.
Tash has just asked a question about warranties, because if you're I mean, who's taking the liability there? Presumably the installer, but that's so how does it work with warranty if someone doesn't use an improved installer?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Well, I guess because we're doing the manufacturing and supply to them, it would be quite difficult for somebody who we don't approve to install it to buy it off us. I guess they could give it to somebody else who would then install it, but because it would be a custom kit per house, effectively you order it made to measure for the house. We see that's quite unlikely. So it would be effectively pretty much the network that we have. And our go-to-market is effectively go and acquire those installers and main contractors, as well as the end customers if they're large landlords and specifiers. But effectively, that's the channels that we'll sell through. So you would go to we're in contact with several installers who do maybe 500 to 1,000 houses a year, and they would be ideal for us. So they would get us into those private customers as well in a sort of like scaled way. And then the insurance-backed warranty schemes, that's something that we'll be working towards. And yeah, like any other system, we'll get it approved by that. So if you buy the system, it will become warranted as like a normal EWI.
Sorry, I think Tash has got a follow-up question.
Yeah.
Well, I presume they would do. Would the existing installers need any additional training to be able to install VundaHaus?
We think that they will need training. We'll provide an onboarding approach, like sort of academy where we'll train people up, but not that much. I think like the level of technical skill is not higher than the existing installers, and in fact, it might it means you don't have to do wet trades. So in some sense, there is that skill is not needed in this. But the general installation skills that they have would be plenty to do what we do. So we will train them in the particulars of our system, but not it's not a high training amount that they would need.
And then, I mean, from the vision, I mean, obviously looking to create a scalable solution. Is it a better solution in terms of you're still at the mercy of the installers, aren't you? And then from what I read about, just as a layman being a landlord looking at solutions, there's an awful lot of noise, bad news stories around poorly installed EWI, resulting in damp and mold growth and cold bridges and everything along there. So, I mean, so is there anything about this solution that would limit that or ensure that it is going to be installed correctly?
Yeah, really good question. So we all know like there is definitely a quality control or like a variability of outcomes in the industry today. Definitely. That's been dramatically improved by past 2035. But when you look at the private market, there's still a huge amount of variability. We see that both in price and in the quality of outcome. And they're not necessarily driven by each other. With what we're doing, yes, there is the opportunity to make this a better solution. So the fact it is designed for the house and it's labeled exactly where part A goes, that means that there is less room for, I guess, variability in the way it's applied. In terms of the quality of the install, we will have a quality control process where, that's fed back to us as part of the installation process, where we can see photos of the install and assess it. And what we'll do is weed out installers that don't follow what we deem as like a good acceptable quality, like as part of a sort of improved installer network, but much more involved than the typical ones you see with other manufacturers, where it's really just they've been had a half a day on seeing the product and then it's on a website somewhere. So we do see that quality control is really critical because it will be a product that's very associated with our brand, and sort of you're only as good as your last few jobs sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So it's something we'll manage really closely. But there is ways in the design of the system, and maybe Alex can touch upon that in a minute, that we're sort of addressing that. It can only fit together in a certain way, and it's designed to, there's not heaps of parts left over. If you've got a big part left over, maybe you did it wrong, and that all the components are really designed in such that they can only, they're fitted with good instructions and only fitted in one way. Mm-hmm. Also, very robust in the way that they're designed, right? So the failure rates and things like that are accounted for.
Yeah. So one of the key failure points with wet applied EWI, so adhered or mechanically fixed the wall and then render over the top, is either failure of the render itself because it hasn't been applied properly, because it was applied in the wrong weather conditions, or the mix wasn't right, or someone who was skilled enough to sort of bond it properly, etc. It was too thick, too thin. So lots of ways that can go wrong. Or it's at junctions like eaves and verges are a classic example, where cheap and cheerful, flimsy, not supplied as part of a system, just someone else's bit of metal is screwed in place or held in place with a bit of gunk, and those leak, and that essentially does the same thing as a failure in the render. It bypasses the render, allows water to enter the insulation, and then that can't effectively get out other than causing more damage to the render and insulation system. So we tackle that in a couple of ways, in that we've got kind of kit of parts terminations and things which are more robust than the cheap and steerful stuff you get from a trade store, and easy to install and get right. And ours is also essentially a rain screen system. There is a small ventilated cavity, which means that if there is water behind, it's much easier for that to dry. So any issues you do get, even if there's just a thunderstorm during installation and you get a bit of insulation wet, which you get a new build all the time, right? That can dry out. It doesn't cause further problems. And because the finish is dry fit, you don't have the challenge like with render, or, for example, in the roofing market, roof failure tend to be from joints that you've inspected as best you can, but they still didn't quite bond right and you get a leak. That's the short sort of near-term callback risk in roofing often. So with a dry fit system, you don't have to inspect a joint for integrity in a complex way. If it's clicked together, basically, it's done, move on. So that makes that inspection process and the uninspectability of the system much less.
Cool. There's Alex on the chat has asked a question, but I don't know whether we want to move on or whether we could just address. It was a similar point to what I was saying.
Yeah, I think I can address that one. So Alex has said, who decides if a product is suitable for the house? Installer-driven assessment with a retrofit often goes wrong. So I think in the process, we are looking to play a big role in the initial survey because it will need to come through our sort of design process, basically. So to create the kit, effectively, you've got kind of a QA at the beginning and a QA at the end to be able to make this work. So it is something where the installer would kind of use us as a service to, maybe they would take some surveys, but we would see the quality of the survey and the information and be able to judge from there. And it will also, need to fit within our process. So I think there's some standardization that we can do that will make that work well.
I think the roofing market is a good example for this again, where essentially this is the way that roofing manufacturers and roofing systems worked. They're designed and warranted as a system with layers. They're approved installers, but you have the technical support in terms of decision making and specification and inspections from the manufacturer. You just deal with an approved installer, and those can be held to accounts.
Cool.
Do you want to go to the next slide, Alex?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just a little bit around the process. So we're also looking to account for all the other things that need to come with a retrofit. So doors, windows, ventilation, and some of the other. We're early days on below the heat pump, battery, and solar PV. But it's something that we are eventually hoping to bundle up as a kind of a kit, so that can be done all as one go. So a whole house. That's something that we feel like our offsite solution really caters well for. That you can kind of configure a house as you would want it, like a bit like you would buy a car and add the extras. And we will manage sort of the supply chain element of that. Go to the next slide. And I guess in features, this is probably something which is, I won't go into too detail, but it's a fully non-combustible system, and that's something that we've had as a design requirement right from the start, and also that it's breathable. All the customer research we've done, which has been extensive, has pointed that those are really needed in the market, and not currently what's the default standard, although that is getting better. That is moving towards this, but that's our key design requirement. And then I guess in terms of one of the things that we might not have covered is we can do varying levels of insulation thickness as part of this. So I guess we envisage that there is a market for the more pragmatic end, especially in social housing, and there is a market for people wanting really good performance, and we can cater to those. If you go to the next one. Yeah, so I think just a little bit around where we go next. As we said, we are in the midst of designing the new version of the panelized system based on the feedback from our pilots, and we're really setting up the next scale of manufacturing so that we can cope with the future demands and be able to make a mass customization finish that people are really excited about. And we are looking to explore our first commercial projects, which over the second half of this year. Yeah.
Sorry, was that image there then? Is that what do you call it, CGI, or is that an actual test house or project that you've done?
I think Alex will be really pleased that you thought that they might be realistic, but they are actually just design sort of
right. Okay.
Give an idea of what we're heading for, right? That's where we're trying to find.
Yeah. Well, obviously I can see that does look good. So that's what probably people would expect to receive when they pay for something like this. I mean, in terms of looking at the wider market and social landlords and anyone who's looking to add external wall insulation. I mean, I'm mentioning landlords just because obviously there's regulatory pressure in order to ensure that to attract both finance and tenants, then we've got to move to EPCC's minimum. So there's a job to be done in terms of making the homes more energy efficient, but so you can make the houses more energy efficient, and your rationale for doing that is either just to get to the sea in order to continue to be a landlord, or because you really want to make a difference as well. And I suppose it's going to be a combination of both of those, depending on how landlords think. But in terms of upgrading properties from say a D to whatever they can achieve, when I've spoken to an APC assessor in the past, and he said, well, you could put some solar on, but I said, well, the roof's too small. He said, well, just put solar on. Even if you put a couple of arrays, you're ticking a box, and that is bloody ludicrous. It is absolutely ludicrous that you can put solar on that doesn't work, but it's going to get you the letter that you need. I mean, that is just mental. So, but in terms of actually delivering an energy efficient home, is there a ladder of options that that you should choose in terms of the one that's going to make the most difference? And would that be EWI? How does that all fit into a sort of an option of options for people to consider?
Yeah, I think that is it's really interesting. I mean, it's very nuanced, right? Because I guess like there is no straightforward like. I think there is a debate of like fabric first, fabric fifth, etc.
Sure.
And there is definitely some proponents of solar PV, and I think that it is actually a really good technology. One thing
No,
I think,
I flip. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
I think it's
But
I think
just
it's
what my example there was
oh no, I totally get
on a
it.
roof that's too small to actually make a difference. The fact that you put some on there is just going to get you to a better grade. That's just bonkers. I mean, you've got the embodied carbon of doing so, the practicality, a waste of money. I mean, it's just senseless. Um,
There's probably changes in the way EPCs are done in the near future.
sure, sure.
On a consultation, I think one thing I would say is that there is some difference between the private able to pay market and social landlords. So, for example, in the private able to pay market, there is quite I would say still small adoptions, early adopters still, but there is some people adopting heat pumps without fabric, and
Yeah,
that well, it can save you a little bit of money, but what tends to happen in underheated houses in social housing and often in private rental sector is that actually you need to improve the thermal comfort because the person can't afford the bills in some cases.
sure. Yeah,
So there is an element of social landlords and many landlords are also wanting to improve the thermal comfort of the
yeah,
house,
yeah,
and that will have impact on the asset values over time.
yeah.
Uh, there's kind of probably about 5 million houses in the target crosshairs of like EPCC, which includes the private rental sector and the social landlords that are below EPCC.
Hmm.
And what we think is that there is a good proportion which might be terraces and flats, which might not need any fabric upgrade or might need light fabric upgrade. And then there are those which are end of terraces, semi-detached, bungalows, detached, which probably, almost certainly when they're below low D or below, will need some fabric upgrade.
Hmm.
I guess where we're heading to is to be able to make fabric upgrades a bit more like getting solar panels installed.
Yeah,
Not a rigmarole. It's not like hugely painful, hugely expensive. It's sort of like, well, you pay some money, right? It's not going to be super cheap, but you pay some money. Somebody comes within a week or two and they spend 3 or 4 days on the scaffolding and then it's taken down, it's done. And it's a good finish that you're confident that you get what you pay for. I think that's really what we're trying to achieve, and something that people are excited about getting. Like when you get solar panels or a heat pump, you feel good about it, and you're not disappointed with the finish or that you feel like you've degraded your house. And I think where we see that, what in terms that you mentioned, what's the impacts? Generally, EWI definitely does work. It does have like a definite improvement of about 35 to 40% of bills. And it really also works well when you add heat pumps and things as well with it. That's been well proven. And it definitely makes the thermal comfort for the occupant much better.
hmm. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, the if you're going to be looking to make improvements, and yeah, thermal comfort is key, and you've got to deliver on it to make that difference.
Yeah,
Fine.
we definitely see that there is a bottom 20% of houses that are really not comfortable at all and that definitely need
Yeah,
some.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. No, I'm not sure if anyone else has got any other questions, but I think we've um, covered most things. I mean, in terms of you as a business and as a startup, oh, sorry, Alex, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I had a few questions, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. It's very interesting. Um, I guess one of my worries of doing factory-based stuff, and maybe it's not a worry, but obviously a large percentage of the time doing external wall insulation is dealing with external drainage, rainwater goods, your gas meter stuck to the outside wall, all those things, which won't get any quicker with your system. So it's whether actually there's an overall percentage of time there's that much of a saving, because you still need 2 weeks of someone digging trenches or whatever around your house. And how that also then deals with every single job I go to and assess a property, the ground levels are always too high. They've always gone up since the house was built and need reducing as part of the works. So how do you deal with that problem with the DPC being the wrong height for the ground, or needing to change external drainage and things like that. Just all the difficult stuff associated with EWI install.
Do you want to answer this, Alex, or do you want me
Yeah,
to?
I can answer that one. So yeah, no, it's absolutely valid. There are lots of challenges, especially on small projects where you don't get any big runs of wall, you just get all of the abnormals or the normals, and not much sort of space where you can kind of pick up speed and do it efficiently. That said, even the quotes easy bits of wall still have problems, as we've been talking about, and are still more time consuming than they need to be, more disruptive, messier, etc. And some of those sort of detailing and complexity areas, like eaves, for example, there are potentially ways that having kind of better design kits to solve them does make them easier. Yeah, and if you have to move a gas meter, you have to move a gas meter, and there's not much you can do about making that easier. We have been looking at some solutions to make moving gullies, ground drains, a bit easier. But yeah, I mean, there is only so much you can do on a chunk of that stuff.
I would say, however, though, that like there is, I guess it's kind of like, yes, we might not be able to solve all of it, but if you can solve some of it, it does make the projects more viable. So we do know, for example, like, okay, so plain render AWI, it is difficult and it does take a long time, and but they do happen, right? There is like about 50,000 houses a year getting retrofitted. I think a lot of people would like to see that number go up, but there is shortages of labor which drive the price of labor up every year. It seems to inflate a lot, which general inflation. And I think if you can solve some of those problems, it means that the overall viability does improve. So we've got labor. If you can save money on that, it's the price of brick finishes, for example, and getting them into planning, and it's all the components that go with it, and even just like eliminating delays from weather can make a lot of these products these projects much more viable, even if you can't solve the whole problem. For example, solar is now relatively easy to fit, but you still got to get scaffolding for it. It'd be nice if someone came up with a no scaffolding solution, but there's always some hurdles you've got to get over, even if you can make some of it very, very, very much quicker. So I think it's never going to be a silver bullet, is my point, but it does help.
Did you have another question, Alex?
No, I think that was it really. And obviously, I think I've commented on the Sheffield job previously on the LinkedIn post, and I think there's similar thoughts from other architects about whether and how great it looked or not. But I appreciate that it's the first hit at it, and lots of it's maybe down to how stuff was pointed on site, which will be different next time. So I think overall it's interesting, and I can see cases like that gable end wall where it's a really good system, and having a ventilated cavity to me seems like a much better, safer option than gluing some foam on the outside of the building.
Well,
Yeah,
I hope next time, Alex, there will be absolutely no on-site pointing at all.
Yes, I was going to say the same thing. It's with any innovative thing, right? You've got a curve, you've got a learning curve, you've got an R&D curve, you've got the fact that sometimes you've got time pressures with things that you've got to deliver on before you like to spend a bit more time on different things. So we lots of things you're pointing out we knew, but at the same time they are how you get to the desired finish, right? And we're iterating really quickly, and spend a lot of time on R&D. So I guess that's part of the journey, I guess. But we were quite happy with it for the place we were in that journey. As I say, hopefully next ones will be eliminating some of those problems.
Cool. Well, no, good luck with that then. I mean, in terms of sort of next steps and your goals as a company, what are you looking to? I mean, you obviously gave a vision at the end of what you anticipate the product to look like, and your suite of offerings as well in terms of sort of looking at it holistically, I suppose. Yeah, so you're going to be like a one-stop shop.
Yeah, exactly. So the short-term goals are we are looking to take on commercial work, and we've got some of those projects sort of starting to line up, and we're also looking to get a bit further with the manufacturing capability with the new system that we've got, and then from there it will be really trying to get this out into the wild really, and to develop this with both in the social landlord sector, but also with some single private projects as well, and with a varying different finishes as well, because we can offer, as well as the brick finish we've got in development, the system can also take a wide range of sort of commercial facade finishes.
And then just on the like practically, if it was an end of terrace, for instance, who right, yeah. I mean, in terms of sort of the benefit that would have from a thermal comfort, if you were just to do the sidewall as opposed to the front and back. I mean, how has that worked out?
In that project that you see, they did all the other internal walls were done with breathable internal insulation. So they and that was super disruptive, and actually it did take a really long time. They've done a really good job, but it has taken a long time, and they had to shift the family around within the house, and quite disruptive. But that house is a full house treated. So we did ours because that particular wall was really difficult to treat internally.
Yeah.
Because of the configuration. So that one wasn't done as a kind of a single measure, just the end gable. It's something we have considered, and there isn't probably enough data to make a concrete view in it, I would say.
Yeah.
But there are some opinions that, for example, Letty Light and things like that, where they say, well, maybe that is a good idea, right? Maybe, but I think it does need some more. We think it is a good idea as well, potentially, because a lot of the surface area is on that. It's something that needs a bit more data, I think. I mean, Alex, you got a different perspective, but
no, I think there's sort of a growing body of thought in and the people that do Letty Light, Christopher and Co, good sort of science-based grounded people. So I think this is, I think if you can do those, if you can get kind of a good chunk of the benefit and avoid the really complicated bits of a property, that's still going to give you significant improvements. I think where you tend to have problems of, and we get this in new build, and my background in Passivhaus, you get in the sort of, if you've got air leaks, for example, that's a good example with the EWI market is EWI all the walls, even install new windows, but they do a terrible job of sealing between the windows and the walls. All the fabric has been improved, but it's bypassed by having really leaky gaps. So I think where you've got an exceptionally bad weak point, like real significant air change leakage, that's where you start to undermine the benefit of doing partial measures.
Yeah. Cool. No, thanks, guys. Very, very interesting. And obviously it's a challenge that needs to be solved. So best of luck with that. Let us know, keep in touch, let us know how you get on. Thanks for everyone else's questions. Good to have lots of engagement. And guys, if you don't mind sharing the deck with me, if you're happy, then I can just put it up on Meshwork as well. So, but no, enjoy the rest of your days. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us. And that's fantastic. Cheers then, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Ron.
Bye.